The morning mist clung to the Kalimba River like a ghost unwilling to let go of the living. Amara knelt at the water's edge, her thin hands scrubbing fabric against the smooth stones worn down by generations of washerwomen before her. At 14 years old, her fingers were already rough and calloused, her back perpetually bent from years of labor that should never have belonged to a child. The silver pendant around her neck caught the early light, a strange contrast to everything else about her. The torn dress that hung loose on her malnourished frame, the bare feet covered in cuts and calluses, the haunted eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. She didn't know it yet, but this pendant would change everything. Before we continue with Amara's story, if you're drawn to tales of hope rising from despair, of secrets that span decades finally coming to light, then this is a story you cannot miss. Subscribe now, because what happens next will restore your faith in destiny. Hit that notification bell. You'll want to see how this unfolds. The village of Oludare had never been kind to Amara. 3 years ago, when her mother Chinwe had died coughing blood into rags that Amara couldn't wash clean, no matter how hard she tried, the village elders had placed the orphan girl with her Aunt Blessing. That name, Blessing, was perhaps the cruelest joke fate had ever played. There was nothing blessed about the woman or the life she forced upon her dead sister's child. Blessing's compound sat on the edge of Oludare, a collection of buildings that spoke of modest wealth by village standards. The main house where Blessing and her two sons lived boasted a tin roof and concrete walls. The kitchen stood separate, smoke-stained but functional. And then there was the storage shed, a dark, cramped space filled with broken tools, old sacks of grain, and one thin mat where a girl slept among the rats and dust. That girl was Amara. For 3 years she had been invisible. She woke before dawn to fetch water from the river, prepared breakfast she wasn't allowed to eat, washed clothes until her hands bled, scrubbed floors until her knees were raw, and endured Blessing's sharp tongue and sharper hands. The village had paid Blessing to care for the orphan, 5,000 naira every month from the community fund. But Amara saw none of it. She wore rags while Blessing's sons wore new school uniforms. She ate scraps while they complained about having chicken for the third time that week. She slept with rats while they complained their mattresses weren't soft enough. No one questioned it. In Oludar, orphans were burdens to be managed, not children to be cherished. The other children in the village had learned early that Amara was fair game for their cruelty. Zara, the chief's daughter, took particular pleasure in tormenting her. Just yesterday, she had gathered a group of girls to mock Amara's patched dress as she walked to the well. Zara's voice had been loud, meant to carry. Look at the orphan girl. Even the scarecrows in the fields dress better. Tell me, Amara, does your aunt forget you exist, or does she just not care? The other girls had laughed. They always laughed, and Amara had kept walking, head down, bucket balanced on her head, pretending the words didn't cut deeper than any knife could. But they did cut, every single time. Now, alone at the river with only the mist and her thoughts for company, Amara allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her fingers touched the silver pendant that hung against her chest. The only beautiful thing she owned, the only connection to a mother who had loved her. Chinwe had given it to her the night before she died, her hands trembling as she fastened the delicate chain around her daughter's neck. The pendant was simple but elegant, a silver disc engraved with a pattern of intertwining vines and a single word in script so flowing it looked like water. Promise. Her mother's voice, weak but urgent, still echoed in Amara's memory. This belonged to your father. He gave it to me before he left for Lagos. He said it was a promise he would return. Keep it safe, my daughter. Keep it close. One day he will see it and remember. Amara had been 11 then, old enough to understand that her father was a ghost who existed only in her mother's stories. A young man who had loved Chinwe, who had promised to return from the city with enough money to marry her properly, who had vanished like morning mist and never came back. The village had other words for him: coward, liar, the boy who got Chinwe pregnant and abandoned her to shame. But Chinwe had never spoken of him with bitterness. Even as sickness ravaged her body, even as poverty crushed them both, she had defended his memory. He loved me. He would have come back if he could. Something must have happened. Something kept him away. But he loved me, Amara. And he would have loved you. Amara had wanted to believe her. A daughter wants to believe her mother, especially when that mother is dying. But 3 years of living with Blessing, 3 years of being reminded daily that she was the bastard child of a woman foolish enough to trust a man's promises, had hardened that belief into something more like wishful thinking. Still, she wore the pendant. Every day, every night. It was the last gift her mother had given her, and she would sooner cut off her own hand than remove it. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist. Amara worked mechanically, scrubbing Blessing's clothes, her son's school uniforms, the fine fabrics that would never touch her own skin. Her stomach growled. Breakfast had been the same as always, a small handful of leftover gari, eaten quickly before Blessing could find fault with something and take even that away. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear the vehicles approaching until they were quite close. 3 black SUVs rolled into Oludare, their polished surfaces coated with the red dust of rural roads. They moved slowly through the village, drawing stares from everyone who saw them. Vehicles like these didn't come to Oludare. This was a place of battered trucks and motorcycles, of walking and wheelbarrows. These vehicles spoke of wealth beyond imagining. The convoy stopped in the village square. Doors opened. Men in crisp shirts and dark sunglasses emerged, moving with the efficient precision of people accustomed to wealth and power. They fanned out, speaking to villagers, asking questions, and then he stepped out of the middle vehicle. Chief Adebayo Okonkwo stood tall despite his 62 years, his frame still strong, his bearing that of a man who commanded respect without demanding it. He wore a simple white kaftan, but the fabric was clearly expensive, the tailoring perfect. His hair had gone silver, his face lined with the years, but his eyes were sharp and searching. One of his assistants approached him, speaking quietly. The chief nodded, then turned to face the river path. At the river, Amara had finished her washing. She gathered the wet clothes into her basin, balancing it on her head with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this since she was small enough to barely lift the weight. She began the walk back toward the village, her feet finding the familiar path automatically. She didn't see the chief. She didn't see his assistants. She didn't see the small crowd gathering. She only heard her name, spoken in a voice she didn't recognize. Amara, not girl, not orphan, not you there. Her actual name, spoken with something that sounded almost like reverence. She stopped, confused, the basin still balanced on her head. She turned slowly. The man in the white caftan stood 20 paces away, frozen mid-step. His face had gone completely pale. His eyes were locked on her chest. No, not on her chest, on the pendant. One of his assistants moved closer to him, concerned. Chief Okonkwo? Sir, are you all right? The chief didn't answer. He took one step forward, then another. Then he was running, actually running, his fine shoes kicking up dust as he closed the distance between them. Amara stepped back, frightened. The basin tumbled from her head, clothes scattering across the ground. She clutched the pendant instinctively, protecting it. And then Chief Adebayo Okonkwo, one of the wealthiest men in the entire region, a man who owned hotels and businesses and lands stretching across 3 states, fell to his knees in the dirt at her feet. His hands were shaking as he reached toward the pendant, stopping just short of touching it. His eyes, those sharp, commanding eyes, were filled with tears. Where did you get this? His voice broke on the words. Please, where did you get this pendant? The entire village seemed to hold its breath. Amara's voice came out small and trembling, barely audible above the whisper of wind through the trees. She told him the pendant had belonged to her mother, that it was given to her before death came knocking. The words felt strange on her tongue, speaking to this powerful man who knelt in the dust like a beggar. Chief Okonkwo's face transformed. Every line, every wrinkle seemed to deepen with an emotion too vast for a single name. Grief, regret, disbelief, hope. They warred across his features as he stared at the silver disc catching the morning light. His assistant placed a hand on his shoulder, speaking urgently. Chief, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. But the chief seemed unable to move, unable to look away from Amara's face. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. Your mother, what was her name? Chinwe. Chinwe Mwamba. The sound that came from Chief Okonkwo's throat was something between a sob and a gasp. He closed his eyes and tears ran down his weathered cheeks, cutting tracks through the dust that had settled on his face during his desperate run. The crowd had grown now. Word traveled fast in Oludare, faster than fire, faster than flood. Villagers emerged from compounds and workshops, from the market and the fields. They formed a circle around this impossible scene, the wealthy chief on his knees before the orphan girl everyone despised. Among them stood Blessing, her face twisted with confusion and growing alarm. Her two sons flanked her, equally bewildered. Elder Kofi, the village head, pushed through the crowd, his walking stick tapping urgently against the hard-packed earth. Chief Okonkwo. Elder Kofi's voice carried the forced joviality of a man trying to control a situation, spiraling beyond his understanding. What an unexpected honor. We had no word of your visit. Please, come to my compound. We can discuss whatever matter brings you to our humble village in comfort. The chief didn't acknowledge him. His attention remained fixed on Amara with an intensity that made her want to shrink away, to disappear into the earth itself. But something in his eyes held her in place. Not threat, not anger. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. Chin Wei. He whispered the name like a prayer. When did she pass? 3 years ago. Amara's voice was steadier now, though her hand still shook. The sickness took her slowly. The coughing started in the rainy season and never stopped. Chief Okonkwo made that terrible sound again. His hands came up to cover his face and his shoulders shook. This man, this powerful man who commanded respect and wielded influence like a weapon, wept openly in the village square. His assistant, a younger man with kind eyes and worry creasing his forehead, crouched beside him. Sir, please, let us take you somewhere you can sit down. Whatever this is, we can handle it privately. No! The chief's voice was firm despite the tears. He lowered his hands and looked at Amara with eyes that saw through her, beyond her, into some past only he could access. Chinwe Mwamba. She lived here? In Oludare? All her life, Amara confirmed. Until the end. And the child? His voice cracked on the word. She had a child? Amara didn't understand the question. She was the child. Obviously, she was the child. But something in the way he asked, the desperate hope threading through the words, made her pause. Mama Sifa, the oldest woman in Oludare, pushed through the crowd with surprising strength for her 90-some years. She was tiny, bent like a question mark, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass and twice as cutting. The child is standing right in front of you, Adebayo Okonkwo. Her voice carried the authority of age and absolute certainty. Though you wouldn't know it, would you? Running off to Lagos 38 years ago with promises on your lips and stars in your eyes. Chinwe waited. God help her. That girl waited. The crowd murmured. 38 years ago. The timeline clicked into place like bones settling into joints. Chief Okonkwo stared at Amara with new eyes. Eyes that traced every line of her face, every feature, searching for something. His hand moved toward her, trembling, then dropped. How old are you? 14. I'll be 15 next month. 14. He repeated the word like it was a mathematical equation he couldn't solve. But Chinwe, I left 38 years ago. We were both 17. If she had been pregnant when I left. She wasn't. Mama Sifa's pronouncement silenced the whispers. Chinwe discovered she was carrying 3 months after you abandoned her. By then, your letters had stopped coming. By then, the money orders had stopped arriving. By then, she understood she was alone. No. Chief Okonkwo shook his head violently. No, I wrote every week for 5 years. I sent money every single month. I never stopped. I swear on everything I hold sacred, I never stopped. Then where were the letters? Mama Sifa's question cut like a blade. Where was the money? Why did Chinwe die in poverty, believing you'd forgotten her? The chief turned to Elder Kofi, and the transformation was terrifying. The grieving man vanished, replaced by someone hard and dangerous. Who handled the mail in this village 38 years ago? Elder Kofi's face went gray. He took a step back, his walking stick wobbling. Chief Okonkwo, I don't see what. Who handled the mail? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Mama Sifa spoke again. Elder Benson. He was postmaster for 40 years. Dead now, 10 years in the ground. But he wasn't alone in his sins. Her gaze swept across the gathered elders. These men who had led Oludar for decades, who made decisions and passed judgment and held themselves above reproach. Several of them wouldn't meet her eyes. There were letters, she continued, each word a hammer blow. I saw them myself, burning in the barrel behind the post office. When I confronted Benson, he said it was trash. But I recognized the Lagos postmarks. I knew who they were for. Why? Chief Okonkwo's voice was barely human. Why would anyone do that? Elder Kofi found his courage, or perhaps his pride wouldn't let him remain silent. The girl had shamed her family, shamed the village, getting pregnant out of wedlock, by a boy who ran away to the city. We thought it would be better if she understood there were consequences, that she couldn't just wait for some fairy tale rescue. The chief stood slowly, drawing himself up to his full height. For a moment, Amara thought he might strike Elder Kofi, his hands clenched into fists. His jaw worked as he fought for control. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, deadly quiet. You decided to play God with people's lives. You kept a pregnant woman in poverty when I was sending money. You kept her in despair when I was sending love. You stole her hope, her future, her dignity. For what? Village pride? We couldn't have known. Elder Kofi began. You didn't want to know. The chief's words cut him off. You wanted to punish her, a 17-year-old girl. You wanted to make an example of her. He turned back to Amara, and his expression softened. Seeing her seemed to hurt him, every glance a fresh wound. Your mother. Tell me about her. Please. And so Amara did. Standing in the village square with the sun climbing higher and the crowd pressing close, she told him about Chinwe, about her mother's gentleness, her quiet strength, about how she'd worked as a seamstress, her fingers flying over fabric, creating beauty even as poverty crushed her, about the stories she'd told Amara of a boy with kind eyes and a quick laugh who'd promised to return. She never blamed you, Amara said, and watched something break in the chief's face. She said you loved her, that something must have kept you away. She believed in you until the very end. I did love her. The words came out raw. I loved her more than anything. I worked myself half to death in Lagos trying to build something worthy of her. Every business deal, every investment, every success, it was all for her, so I could come back and give her everything she deserved. Then why didn't you? The question burst from Amara before she could stop it. If you loved her so much, why did it take 38 years? Why did you let her die? The chief had no answer, or rather he had only the truth, and the truth was damning. Fear, he said simply. Cowardice. I kept telling myself 1 more year, 1 more achievement, and then I'd be worthy of facing her. I convinced myself she'd moved on, married someone else, that she wouldn't want to see me. So I waited, and turned waiting into an art form until it was too late. Blessing pushed forward suddenly, her face flushed with something between excitement and panic. Chief Okonkwo, this is wonderful news. A father and daughter reunited. Of course, I've been caring for dear Amara since Chinwe's passing, treating her like my own daughter. We've grown very close, haven't we, child? The lie was so audacious, so breathtaking in its shamelessness, that for a moment no one spoke. Then Mama Sifa laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Close? Is that what you call locking a child in a storage shed? Feeding her scraps while your sons grow fat? Taking money meant for her care and spending it on yourself? Blessing's face went from flushed to pale. That's... I never... She's lying. Am I? Mama Sifa turned to Amara. Show him, child. Show him where you sleep. The truth was coming to light, but the full extent of Amara's suffering was still hidden in shadows. What happens when Chief Okonkwo discovers how his daughter has truly been living? Subscribe now. You won't believe what he does next. This story is just beginning. The walk to Blessing's compound felt like a funeral procession. Chief Okonkwo moved with deadly purpose, his assistants flanking him, the crowd following at a respectful distance. Amara led the way, her feet finding the familiar path automatically, though her mind spun with vertigo. Everything was changing too fast. The world she'd known, terrible as it was crumbling around her. Blessing hurried ahead, speaking rapidly, desperately. Chief, please understand. The conditions are humble but clean. We're simple village folk, not city people with your resources. I've done my best with what I have. The girl exaggerates. Children always exaggerate when they want attention. No one responded. The silence was more condemning than any accusation. They reached the compound, and Chief Okonkwo's sharp eyes took in everything. The main house with its solid walls and tin roof. The separate kitchen, well-maintained and stocked. The small garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. And then, at the far edge of the property, half hidden behind a pile of firewood, the storage shed. Amara walked to it without being asked. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the warped wooden door. The hinges squealed in protest, a sound so familiar it was almost comforting. Almost. The chief stepped inside, and the change in his expression was immediate. The shed was barely 6 feet by 8 feet, with a ceiling so low he had to duck. No windows. No light except what filtered through gaps in the warped planks. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, old grain, and something else. The particular scent of poverty and neglect. In one corner lay Amara's sleeping mat, thin as paper, stained with years of use. A single threadbare blanket lay folded on top. That was it. No possessions, no personal items, no hint that a human child lived here. Just tools, sacks, broken equipment, and that pitiful mat. Chief Okonkwo stood frozen, staring at the mat like it was a serpent. His breathing grew harsh, ragged. One of his assistants pulled out a phone, taking photographs, documenting everything with clinical efficiency. When the chief finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost inaudible. This is where she slept. I had no other space, Blessing said quickly. The house is small. My sons need their room for studying. The girl understood. She never complained. Because complaining would have meant more beatings. Mama Sifa had followed them, this tiny ancient woman who seemed determined to speak every truth everyone else wanted buried. I've seen the bruises, Blessing. The whole village has seen them. We just chose not to care because she was an orphan, and orphans don't matter in Olodari. I disciplined her when necessary. Blessing's voice rose, defensive now. Children need discipline. My sister spoiled her, filled her head with nonsense about fathers who cared and futures that would never come. Someone had to teach her reality. Chief Okonkwo turned to face her, and Blessing actually stepped back. The look in his eyes was beyond anger. It was something colder, something that spoke of consequences that would span years. You took money to care for her. It wasn't a question. The village paid you from the community fund. How much? Elder Kofi, who had followed the procession with growing dread, cleared his throat. 5,000 naira, monthly, for 3 years. 180,000 naira. The chief's voice remained dangerously calm. And what did she receive for that money, Blessing? Show me her clothes. Amara felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth, but she walked to the corner of the shed and pulled out her only other possession, a small cloth bag. Inside were two dresses, both more patches than original fabric, both several sizes too small, a pair of underwear with holes, no shoes, no socks, no jacket for the cold season. The chief's assistant photographed these two, his face carefully neutral, but his hands shaking slightly as he worked. And food? Chief Okonkwo's question hung in the air like a blade. Amara hesitated. Speaking felt like betrayal somehow, like breaking an unspoken rule. But Mama Sifa had no such hesitation. She eats leftovers, the old woman stated flatly. After Blessing and her sons finish, sometimes nothing at all if they've eaten everything. I've seen her collecting mangoes that fell from trees because her belly was empty. I've seen her drinking river water to fill the space where food should be. Chief Okonkwo's hands clenched and unclenched. His assistant moved closer, clearly worried the chief might do something they'd all regret. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. Get her things, all of them. Amara picked up her cloth bag. It took 3 seconds. Everything she owned in the world fit in one small bag that weighed almost nothing. That's everything? The chief's voice cracked slightly. She nodded. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. Amara, go wait by the vehicles. I need to speak with your aunt privately. Chief Okonkwo, please. Blessing's voice shifted, taking on a wheedling tone. Let's be reasonable. I made mistakes, yes, but I also gave her shelter when no one else would. Surely that counts for something. We're family. We can work this out within the family. The chief ignored her, his attention on Amara. Go, please. You don't need to hear this. Amara walked back toward the village square, clutching her small bag. Behind her, she heard voices rising, the chief's assistants asking questions, Elder Kofi trying to mediate, Blessing's voice growing shrill with panic and indignation. At the vehicles, the driver opened a door for her. Would you like to sit inside, miss? It's cooler. Miss, not girl, not orphan. Miss. She climbed into the back seat, sinking into leather so soft it felt like a dream. The air conditioning wrapped around her like a cool embrace. Through the tinted windows, she watched the village she'd known her entire life, seeing it differently now. These people who had watched her suffer, these people who had known and done nothing. Zara stood with a group of girls near the market, all of them staring at the vehicles with wide eyes. When Zara's gaze met Amara's through the window, the chief's daughter's face went through a remarkable transformation. Shock, disbelief, and finally something that looked like fear. 20 minutes later, Chief Okonkwo emerged from Blessing's compound. His face was carved from stone, showing nothing. His assistants followed, one of them speaking quietly into a phone. Elder Kofi trailed behind, wringing his hands. The chief walked directly to the vehicle, sliding into the seat beside Amara. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with visible effort, he turned to face her. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that? Amara nodded. Are you willing to come with me? To leave Oludar? To come to Lagos? To let me try to give you the life you should have had? He paused, and his next words came with obvious difficulty. I know I'm a stranger. I know I have no right to ask this after failing your mother so completely. If you want to stay here, if you want me to arrange for someone else to care for you, I'll do that. I won't force you. But I'm asking, begging for a chance to know you, to be your father if you'll let me. The question hung between them, enormous in its implications. Leave Oludari. Leave the only home she'd ever known, terrible as it had been. Go with this stranger who claimed to be her father, who wept for a mother she'd never really known. But what was there to stay for? A village that had watched her suffer, an aunt who had beaten her, a future that promised nothing but more of the same grinding poverty and casual cruelty. And this man, this stranger, looked at her like she mattered, like she was someone worth saving. Yes, Amara heard herself say. I'll come with you. Relief flooded his face, so profound it was almost painful to witness. Thank you. Thank you. He turned to his assistant. Call ahead. I want a full medical examination scheduled for tomorrow. Nutritionist, therapist, education assessment, everything. And contact Dr. Adeyemi. Tell her I need her to take on a new patient. Priority. The assistant nodded, already dialing. Elder Kofi appeared at the window, his face sweating despite the morning cool. Chief Okonkwo, about the community fund. I want to assure you that we'll conduct a full accounting. Any discrepancies will be addressed. You'll do more than that. The chief's voice could have cut steel. You'll return every naira that was stolen from my daughter, with interest, and you'll contribute to a fund I'm establishing in her mother's name, the Chinwe Mwamba Foundation for Orphan Girls. You and every elder who knew about those letters and said nothing. Chief, we can't possibly afford. Then sell your land, sell your houses, sell everything you own. The chief leaned forward and Elder Kofi actually stumbled back. You stole from a child. You let her starve while pocketing money meant for her care. You destroyed letters that would have brought me back years ago, that would have saved Chinwe's life. You will pay. One way or another, you will pay. It was Elder Benson who... Elder Benson is dead, but you're not. You knew. You all knew. And you did nothing. The chief's voice dropped to something almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. I'm going to build a school here, a proper school for girls, the Chinwe Mwamba School, and you're going to donate the land for it, all of you. Consider it the price of my not pursuing criminal charges for child abuse and fraud. Elder Kofi's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Finally, he managed, Yes, Chief, of course. Whatever you think is appropriate. The driver started the engine. Through the window, Amara watched Blessing emerge from her compound, her face mottled with rage and tears. She shouted something Amara couldn't hear over the engine's purr. Mama Sifa stood in the road as the vehicles began to move. The old woman raised one gnarled hand in farewell or blessing or both. Her lips moved, forming words Amara couldn't hear, but somehow understood anyway. Be free, child. Be free. The journey to Lagos took 6 hours, though to Amara it felt like traveling to another planet. The landscape transformed gradually, red dust roads giving way to paved highways, sparse villages yielding to sprawling towns, and finally the massive sprawl of Lagos itself, a city that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own heartbeat. Chief Okonkwo spent much of the drive on his phone, his voice alternating between the warm tones he used when speaking to family and the ice-cold authority he wielded in business. Amara caught fragments of conversations, arrangements being made, people being summoned, a life being constructed around her before she'd even arrived. It was overwhelming, terrifying. And yet, when she glanced at this man who claimed to be her father, something in her chest loosened slightly. He kept looking at her like she might disappear, like she was something precious and fragile that needed protecting. No one had ever looked at her that way before. They entered Lagos as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The city rose around them, buildings taller than anything Amara had imagined possible, roads packed with more vehicles than existed in all of Oludar. People everywhere, moving with purpose and speed that made her dizzy. The vehicles turned into a neighborhood where the chaos of Lagos seemed to quiet into something more refined. Gates opened automatically, revealing streets lined with massive houses hidden behind high walls and manicured gardens. Each compound looked like a palace compared to anything Amara had ever seen. They stopped before iron gates decorated with intricate metalwork. The gates swung open, and the vehicles glided up a driveway flanked by flowering trees. The main house stood 3 stories tall, its white walls gleaming in the fading light, windows countless as stars. Amara's breath caught. This was a house? People lived in something this enormous? The chief noticed her expression, and something like pain crossed his face. It's too much, isn't it? We can start you somewhere smaller if this is overwhelming. I have other properties. The idea that this might be considered small made Amara's head spin. She shook her head mutely, unable to form words. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened, And then they were standing before the house and people were emerging, servants in crisp uniforms, greeting the chief with respectful bows, their curious gazes sliding toward Amara with barely concealed interest. A woman appeared in the doorway, tall and elegant, her natural hair styled in intricate braids. Her clothes simple but clearly expensive. She was perhaps 40, with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes that assessed Amara in a single comprehensive glance. Ada, the chief's voice carried warmth and relief. Thank you for coming so quickly. You said it was urgent. The woman, Ada, descended the steps with fluid grace. You said you'd found her. I didn't believe it. I thought perhaps you'd finally lost your mind after all these years of searching. I found her. The chief's hand rested gently on Amara's shoulder. Ada, this is Amara, my daughter. Amara, this is Dr. Ada Adeyemi, an old friend and someone I trust with my life. Dr. Adeyemi's sharp gaze softened slightly as she studied Amara. Hello, Amara. Your father has talked about finding you for as long as I've known him. I'm glad you're here. She paused. Are you hungry? The question was so simple, so direct, that Amara found herself nodding before thinking. When had she last eaten? Yesterday? The day before? Then let's start there. Dr. Adeyemi took charge with the easy authority of someone accustomed to managing crises. Bio. She needs food, a bath, clean clothes, and rest. The examination can wait until tomorrow. Don't argue with me. The chief looked like he might argue anyway, but Dr. Adeyemi cut him off with a raised hand. Tomorrow. First, we address basic needs. You want to help her? Start by not overwhelming her on day one. He nodded, chastened. Of course. You're right. He turned to Amara. Mrs. Obi will show you to your room. Is that all right? An older woman stepped forward, her round face creased with smile lines. Come, dear girl. Let's get you settled. The next hour passed in a blur. Mrs. Obi led Amara through rooms so vast and beautifully furnished they seemed unreal. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture that looked too perfect to actually use, and finally a bedroom that was larger than Blessing's entire house. The bed was enormous, covered in soft linens that looked like they'd never been touched. The attached bathroom had gleaming fixtures and more space than the storage shed where Amara had slept for 3 years. There was a closet, empty now but clearly waiting to be filled. Windows overlooked a garden where flowers bloomed in riotous color. This is mine. Amara's voice came out small. All yours, dear. Mrs. Obi's smile was gentle. Now let's run you a bath. Have you ever had a proper bath? Amara had bathed in the river. She'd washed with cold water from a bucket in Blessing's compound. But a bath in a real tub with hot water? Never. The experience was revelatory. Hot water that didn't run cold after 30 seconds. Soap that smelled like flowers. Shampoo that made her hair feel soft instead of brittle. Mrs. Obi waited outside, providing towels and a soft robe when Amara emerged feeling cleaner than she'd felt in years. Clean clothes waited on the bed, simple but well made. They fit properly, neither too tight nor too loose. The fabric felt soft against her skin, not rough or scratchy like everything she'd worn before. Then came food. Mrs. Obi led her to a small dining room. The main dining room would be too formal, she explained, where a meal waited that made Amara's eyes widen. Jollof rice, grilled fish, vegetables cooked in spices that made her mouth water. Fresh fruit, cold water in a glass that sparkled. Eat as much or as little as you want, Mrs. Obi instructed. No one will rush you. No one will take it away. Amara ate slowly at first, waiting for the trick, for someone to snatch the plate away and tell her this was all a joke. But no one came. No one stopped her. She ate until her stomach felt uncomfortably full, and still food remained on the table. Chief Okonkwo appeared in the doorway but didn't enter. He just watched her eat with an expression that seemed to cause him physical pain. Is everything all right? His voice was hesitant, uncertain in a way that seemed strange for someone so obviously powerful. Amara nodded. suddenly self-conscious. Had she eaten too much? Too little? Was she holding the fork wrong? Good. That's good. He cleared his throat. I wanted you to know, tomorrow Dr. Adiyemi will examine you, just to make sure you're healthy. And then, if you're willing, I'd like you to meet some people. But only if you're ready. There's no rush. You can take as much time as you need to adjust. Who? Amara's voice was rough from disuse. The chief's expression shifted into something complex. Your siblings, I have 3 other children, 2 daughters and a son. They're excited to meet you. Well, excited and nervous. This is a lot for everyone. Siblings, the word felt foreign. Amara had been alone for so long that the concept of family beyond a dead mother felt impossible. Their mother? The question slipped out before Amara could stop it. My wife passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. Grief flickered across his face, old but never fully healed. Folake was a good woman. She would have loved you. She knew about your mother, about my search for Chinwe. She encouraged me to keep looking, even when I wanted to give up. He stepped into the room, moving slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. Amara, I need you to understand something. I know I can't replace the years that were stolen from you. I know I can't bring your mother back or undo the suffering you endured. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try to give you everything you should have had. And if you hate me for not finding you sooner, if you can never forgive me for failing Chinwe, I'll understand. But please, let me try. The raw honesty in his voice, the genuine anguish, cracked something in Amara's chest. This man, this stranger, carried guilt like a physical weight. He blamed himself for everything, for leaving, for not returning sooner, for the letters that never arrived, for a mother's death in poverty. She didn't hate you, Amara found herself saying. Mama, she loved you until the end. She told me stories about you. She said you had kind eyes and a good heart. She said you made her laugh. Chief Okonkwo's face crumpled. He turned away quickly, but not before Amara saw the tears. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. What else did she tell you about me? And so Amara shared the stories. Her mother working on her sewing while telling tales of a boy who brought her wildflowers, who walked her home from the market, who promised to build her a house with a garden where she could grow anything she wanted, who kissed her goodbye at the bus station with tears in his eyes and swore he'd return. The chief listened to these fragments of a life he'd lost, a love that had endured despite abandonment, and wept openly. Mrs. Obi appeared with tissues, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder before quietly withdrawing. I bought the land, he said when he could speak again. In Oludara, where I promised to build her a house. I bought it 15 years ago, when I finally made enough money to fulfill that promise. I had plans drawn up, an architect designed everything, but I couldn't build it without her. It felt like admitting she was gone, that I'd failed. So the land just sits there, empty, waiting for a dream that died. Build it now? Amara said quietly. Build it for Mama. She'd like that. She'd like knowing the promise was kept, even if she couldn't see it. The chief looked at her with something like wonder. You're so much like her. That generosity of spirit, that ability to forgive the unforgivable. He stood, wiping his eyes. We'll build it, together, and it won't be just a house. It'll be the school, the Chinwe Mwamba School for Girls, a place where no girl will ever be left behind the way you were. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be overwhelming, I'm afraid. Meeting your siblings, the medical examination, probably too many people wanting to meet you. But Mrs. Obi will be nearby, and I'll be here, always. I promise you that, Amara. I'll never leave again. After he left, Amara returned to her room, to that enormous bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. She lay in the darkness, the pendant still around her neck. She'd refused to remove it even for the bath, and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been an orphan in Oludare, washing clothes in the river, invisible and unloved. Tonight she was the daughter of a billionaire, sleeping in luxury that seemed impossible, with siblings she'd never met, and a future that stretched before her like an undiscovered country. Amara's new life was beginning, but could she truly leave her past behind? What would her siblings think of this poor girl from the village? And what other secrets would emerge about the letters that never arrived and the money that disappeared? Subscribe now. Tomorrow Amara faces her new family and nothing will prepare you for what happens next. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through curtains so fine they seemed woven from gold thread. Amara woke disoriented, forgetting for a moment where she was, expecting the familiar darkness of the storage shed, the musty smell, the rats scurrying in corners. Instead, she found softness, light, and silence broken only by birdsong from the garden. Mrs. Obi arrived with breakfast on a tray, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, bread still warm from the oven, orange juice in a crystal glass. The older woman's eyes were kind as she set the tray on a table by the window. "Take your time, dear. Dr. Adiemi will be here at 10. The chief asked me to tell you that your siblings are eager to meet you, but only when you're ready, no pressure." After Mrs. Obi left, Amara ate slowly, savoring each bite. Still half convinced this was an elaborate dream from which she'd wake to find herself back in Olodar. But the food was real. The room was real. The ache in her chest, half hope, half terror, was devastatingly real. Dr. Adiemi arrived precisely at 10, carrying a medical bag and an air of calm competence. The examination was thorough, but gentle. She checked Amara's weight, severely underweight for her age. Her height, stunted from years of malnutrition. Her teeth, several cavities that would need attention. Old scars on her back and arms. "From blessing?" the doctor asked quietly, and Amara nodded, unable to speak past the shame that rose in her throat. Dr. Adiemi documented everything with clinical precision, but her eyes held fury. When she finished, she sat across from Amara, her expression softening. "You've survived something that would have broken many adults, let alone a child. That takes strength. Remember that in the days ahead. You're stronger than you know." The words settled around Amara like armor she didn't know she needed. At noon, Chief Okonkwo appeared at her door, nervous in a way that seemed absurd for a man of his stature. "They're here, your siblings. Would you like to meet them in the garden?" I thought somewhere open, less formal, might be easier. Amara nodded, though her hands trembled as she followed him through the house. They emerged into the garden where 3 people waited, arranged on elegant outdoor furniture like figures in a painting. The oldest was a young woman, perhaps 22 or 23, with her father's sharp features softened by her mother's gentleness. She wore a simple dress that probably cost more than everything Amara had owned in her entire life. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists, and she stood when she saw them, her expression carefully neutral. Beside her sat a young man, maybe 19, tall and athletic, wearing jeans and a polo shirt. His face was more open, curiosity evident in his gaze. He also stood, his movements restless with barely contained energy. The youngest was a girl around Amara's age, perhaps 15 or 16, with her hair in long braids and an expression that was harder to read. Somewhere between curiosity and something that looked suspiciously like resentment. "Amara." Chief Okonkwo's voice carried weight, formal now in a way it hadn't been before. "These are your siblings. Adana, my eldest, Chidi, my son, and Ngozi, my youngest. Your sisters and brother." The words hung in the air, transforming strangers into family with a single declaration. Adana moved first, stepping forward with grace that spoke of private schools and etiquette lessons. She extended her hand, then seemed to think better of it, and pulled Amara into a gentle hug instead. "Welcome home. We've waited a long time to meet you." Her voice was warm, genuine, but Amara felt the slight tension in her body, the careful control. This was a woman used to managing appearances, to saying the right thing regardless of what she actually felt. Chidi's approach was more casual, his smile wider. "Dad's been talking about finding you for years. I'm glad you're finally here. This is going to be interesting." Ngozi remained seated, her arms crossed, her expression closed. When Amara's eyes met hers, the younger girl looked away, her jaw tight. Chief Okonkwo noticed. Ngozi. What? The girl's voice carried an edge. I said she could come, didn't I? I'm here. What more do you want? Courtesy, kindness, basic human decency. The chief's voice hardened. Amara is your sister. She's been through more than you can imagine. The least you can do is welcome her. Ngozi stood abruptly. Fine, welcome. There, are we done? The tension crackled like electricity. Adana shot Ngozi a warning look, while Chidi shifted uncomfortably. Amara wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth, to be anywhere but here. Ngozi, that's enough. Adana's voice carried authority despite her youth. This isn't about you. For once, this isn't about any of us. It's about making sure Amara feels safe and welcome. Why should I pretend to be happy? Ngozi's voice rose, all her careful control shattering. A week ago, we were a family. Now suddenly there's this girl from nowhere who gets to waltz in and... Ngozi. Chief Okonkwo's voice cracked like thunder. Another word and you'll find yourself with a great deal of time to reflect on your behavior, alone, in your room. The garden fell silent except for birdsong that seemed absurdly cheerful given the atmosphere. Ngozi's face flushed with anger and something else, fear perhaps, or shame. She turned and stalked back into the house, her exit dramatic and final. Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes. This had been a mistake. She didn't belong here, in this world of wealth and siblings who resented her existence. She should have stayed in Oludare, where at least she knew the rules of her suffering. Adana moved closer, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, Ngozi is... She's having a hard time with this. It's not your fault. She's just scared. Scared of what? The question slipped out before Amara could stop it. Of losing Dad. Chidi answered, his usual lightness gone. She's the baby, was the baby. Now suddenly she's not. And Dad's been so focused on finding you for so long. I think she's worried there won't be enough of him to go around. Chief Okonkwo looked stricken. That's not, I would never. We know, Dad. Adana's voice was gentle but firm. But Ngozi is 15. Logic isn't her strong suit right now. Give her time. She'll come around. The chief didn't look convinced. He turned to Amara, his expression full of apology and concern. I'm so sorry. I hoped this would go differently. It's fine. Amara's voice was small. I understand. I'm a stranger. This is strange for everyone. You're not a stranger. Adana's declaration was firm. You're our sister. Blood doesn't lie. And I, for one, am genuinely happy you're here. I always wanted another sister. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Well, I wanted one when I was younger. Then Ngozi came along and I realized sisters could be exhausting. But still, I'm glad you're here. Chidi grinned. Same. Plus, having another sister means Ngozi and I aren't tied for youngest anymore. That's got to count for something. Their attempts at levity helped, but the damage was done. Amara felt like an intruder. Someone who had disrupted a carefully balanced world simply by existing. Mrs. Obi appeared with refreshments, fresh juice, small cakes, fruit. She set everything out with practiced efficiency, her warm presence somehow making the awkwardness more bearable. They sat, this strange new family, and attempted conversation. Adana asked questions about Oludare, then seemed to realize that most of Amara's memories were painful and shifted to safer topics. She talked about university, her studies in international relations, her hopes of working with humanitarian organizations. Chidi discussed football, his team, upcoming matches. His enthusiasm was infectious, and despite everything, Amara found herself almost smiling at his animated descriptions of goals and victories. But underneath the pleasantries, tension hummed. Ngozi's absence was a presence itself, a reminder that Amara's arrival had caused fractures in foundations she didn't even understand. After an hour, Chief Okonkwo stood. I need to handle some business. Adana, Chidi, perhaps you could show Amara around the house? Help her feel more comfortable? It was phrased as a suggestion, but clearly it was a directive. Adana nodded immediately. Of course, come on, Amara. Let me show you your new home. The house tour was overwhelming. 15 bedrooms, multiple living areas, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a home theater, a gym, servant quarters that were nicer than most houses in Olodar. Each room was a revelation of wealth Amara couldn't begin to comprehend. Adana narrated everything with patient kindness, explaining what each space was for, pointing out family photos on walls, a beautiful woman who must have been their mother, younger versions of the siblings, the chief at various stages of his life. That's Mom, Adana said softly, pausing before a large portrait of a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. She died when I was 14, breast cancer. It was hard. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. She would have loved you. Adana's voice was certain. She knew about your mother. Dad told her everything before they married. She said once that she hoped Chinwe had found peace wherever she was. She encouraged Dad to keep searching for you. Said every child deserves to know their father. The generosity of that, a wife encouraging her husband to search for another woman's child, made Amara's throat tight. They reached a door at the end of a long hallway. Adana hesitated before opening it. Inside was a room that took Amara's breath away. The walls were painted soft lavender. The furniture was white and delicate. Shelves waited, empty but ready for books. A desk sat by the window, perfectly positioned for studying. And on the wall, a large painting of a river at sunrise, mist clinging to the water. Dad had this prepared, Adana explained quietly. He's been preparing a room for you for years, changing it as you aged, imagining what you might like. It's been waiting for you. We all have. The revelation was too much. All those years in the storage shed, sleeping with rats, and this room had existed, waiting, prepared by a father who'd never stopped looking. The unfairness of it, the tragedy, crashed over Amara like a wave. She sank onto the bed, soft, so soft, and the tears came. Not quiet tears, great heaving sobs that tore from her chest, releasing years of pain and loneliness and suffering. Adana didn't speak. She simply sat beside Amara on the bed, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, offering silent comfort as the tears flowed. Chidi hovered in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable with the display of emotion, but unwilling to leave. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups and shuddering breaths, Adana produced a tissue from somewhere, pressing it into Amara's hand. Better? Her voice was soft, without judgment. Amara nodded, unable to trust her voice. She wiped her face, embarrassed by the outburst, by her weakness in front of these polished siblings who seemed to have never known real suffering. You don't have to be strong here, Adana said, as if reading her thoughts. Whatever you're feeling, it's valid. You've been through hell. You're allowed to fall apart. I just keep thinking. Amara's voice came out rough. About Mama, how she died believing he'd forgotten her, how she worked herself to death sewing clothes for other people while this... She gestured at the room, the house, the impossible wealth surrounding them. All of this existed. How she could have been saved if just one letter had gotten through. The unfairness of it was crushing. One letter, one piece of paper. That's all it would have taken to change everything. Chidi finally entered the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Dad tears himself apart about it, every day. I've heard him on the phone with investigators, trying to figure out exactly what happened to those letters, who was involved, who knew. He's not going to let it go until everyone responsible pays. It won't bring her back, Amara whispered. No, Adana agreed. But it might bring you justice, and sometimes that matters too. A commotion from downstairs interrupted them. Raised voices, a door slamming. They heard Chief Okonkwo's voice, sharp with authority, and then Ngozi's, high and defensive. Adana sighed. Round two, apparently. I should probably... No. Amara stood, surprising herself. I should talk to her. This is about me. I should face it. Adana looked uncertain. Are you sure? Ngozi can be harsh when she's upset. I've survived worse than harsh words. The truth of that statement hung in the air. Amara had survived beatings, starvation, years of systematic cruelty. A teenage girl's resentment was nothing compared to what Blessing had inflicted. They descended the stairs to find Chief Okonkwo and Ngozi in the living room, squared off like opponents. The chief's face was tight with anger and disappointment. Ngozi's eyes were red, whether from tears or rage was unclear. Just expect me to pretend everything's fine, Ngozi was saying. To smile and welcome this stranger like she belongs here. She does belong here. The chief's voice was hard. She's my daughter, your sister. That makes her family, whether you like it or not. You have no idea what she's actually like. What if she's just after your money? What if she's lying about everything? The accusation hit Amara like a physical blow. After everything, to be called a liar, a gold digger. Ngozi! Adana's voice cracked like a whip. That is enough. You're being cruel and you know it. I'm being realistic. Ngozi whirled to face her sister. Some girl shows up with a necklace and suddenly she's family? How do we even know it's really Dad's? How do we know any of this is true? DNA test. Chief Okonkwo's voice was cold. I had samples taken yesterday. Results will be back in 3 days, though I don't need a test to tell me what I already know. Look at her, Ngozi. Really look at her. She has your grandmother's eyes, your aunt's bone structure. She looks more like our family than you do. The words were cruel, meant to wound, and they landed. Ngozi's face crumpled. So now I'm not even really your daughter? Because I look like Mom instead of your precious bloodline? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. Ngozi's voice broke. Ever since she showed up, it's like the rest of us don't matter. It's all Amara this, Amara that. Poor Amara who suffered so much. What about us? What about what we're feeling? What you're feeling? Amara spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but steady. Is fear that there won't be enough love to go around, that you'll be forgotten or replaced. I understand that fear. I've lived it. Ngozi turned to her, eyes blazing. You don't know anything about me. I know what it's like to be invisible. Amara took a step forward. To feel like you don't matter, to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. I know that fear intimately. I've lived with it every day for 3 years. That's not the same. You're right, it's not. Amara's voice hardened slightly. You were afraid of losing something you have. I was afraid because I had nothing to lose. You sleep in a soft bed and worry about your father's attention. I slept with rats and worried about whether I'd eat that day. So no, it's not the same. But fear is fear, and I understand yours even if you refuse to understand mine. The room fell silent. Ngozi stared at Amara, something shifting in her expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the first crack in her armor. I didn't ask to be here, Amara continued, her voice softer now. I didn't ask for any of this. Yesterday, I was nobody. Today, I'm supposed to be somebody, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be a daughter to a father I just met. I don't know how to be a sister to people who've had their whole lives together without me. I'm terrified. Every moment, I'm terrified that I'll do something wrong, say something wrong, be wrong in a way that proves I don't belong here. Her voice cracked. So if you don't want me here, if you think I'm after money or lying or whatever, just say it. Tell your father you can't accept me, because I can't do this if I'm fighting you every day. I've fought enough. I'm tired of fighting. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Chief Okonkwo looked stricken. Adana's eyes were wet with unshed tears. Chidi had gone very still, and Ngozi's carefully constructed anger was crumbling, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. I don't, she started, then stopped. Tried again. I'm not good at sharing. I never have been. Mom used to say I hoarded attention, like a dragon hoards gold. When she died, Dad became everything. And then he spent years searching for you, talking about you, this ghost daughter who might exist somewhere. And I hated you, this person I'd never met, who took up so much space in his heart. She wiped her eyes roughly. And then you showed up, and you're real, and you've suffered, and I'm supposed to just be okay with it all. But I'm not. I'm not okay with any of it. I'm angry and scared, and I don't know how to be a sister to you. Then don't, Amara said simply. Not yet. Not until you're ready. I'm not asking you to love me or even like me. I'm just asking you not to hate me for existing. Ngozi let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I don't hate you. I want to. It would be easier if I did, but I don't. Chief Okonkwo moved to Ngozi, pulling her into a hug. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, crying in earnest now. I miss Mom. I miss her so much. And now there's this whole other part of your life that she never knew about, and it feels like she's dying all over again. Oh, my baby girl. The chief's voice was thick with emotion. Your mother knew. She knew everything, and she would be the first person telling you to welcome your sister. You know that. That doesn't make it easier. No, he agreed. It doesn't, but we do hard things anyway. That's what family means. He looked at Amara over Ngozi's head. I'm sorry for all of this. I thought bringing you home would solve everything. I didn't consider how complicated this would be for everyone. Nothing worth having is simple, Adana said quietly. We'll figure it out, as a family, all of us together. Mrs. Obi appeared with impeccable timing, carrying a tray of tea and small sandwiches. I thought perhaps everyone could use some sustenance, and maybe we could all sit down like civilized people, instead of standing around like we're at a funeral. The gentle rebuke worked. They migrated to the seating area, settling into chairs and sofas. The tea was hot and sweet. The sandwiches were delicate, perfectly made. Slowly, incrementally, the tension began to ease. Chidi, ever the peacemaker, started telling a story about a disastrous football match, his animated gestures and sound effects drawing reluctant smiles from Ngozi. Adana asked Amara about her favorite subjects in school, then looked stricken when Amara admitted she hadn't attended school in 3 years. We'll fix that, the chief said immediately. I'll hire tutors, get you caught up. You'll have every opportunity. Can we not plan my entire life in one afternoon? Amara's question came out sharper than intended. She softened it with a small smile. I need time to adjust, to breathe, to figure out who I am in this new world. The chief nodded, chastened. Of course, I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix everything at once, and that's not possible. Some things can't be fixed, Amara said quietly. Only live through. The wisdom in those words coming from someone so young silenced them all. This girl who had survived the unsurvivable, who had endured years of cruelty and emerged still capable of compassion, she was teaching them all something about resilience and grace. The afternoon wore on. Conversation flowed more easily now, still awkward in places, but warming gradually. Ngozi didn't apologize again, but she stopped glaring. That felt like progress. As evening approached, Chief Okonkwo stood. I need to make some calls. Amara, there's something I'd like to show you tomorrow, if you're willing. What is it? A surprise. A good one, I promise. He smiled, and for the first time Amara saw genuine joy in his expression, rather than guilt or grief. Something that belonged to your mother. Something I think you should have. The family was beginning to find its footing, but challenges remained. What secret was Chief Okonkwo hiding? What belonged to Chinwe that Amara had never known about? Subscribe now because the next revelation will connect past and present in ways no one expected. This story is building to something extraordinary. That night, sleep came fitfully. Amara lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling where moonlight cast shadows through the curtains. The pendant rested against her chest, warm from her body heat, a constant reminder of the mother who had loved her and the father who had finally found her. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Amara rose, restless, and moved to the window. The garden stretched below, bathed in silver light, peaceful and beautiful. So different from Oludar, where nights had been filled with the sounds of animals and distant voices, where darkness meant vulnerability and fear. A soft knock startled her. The door opened slightly and Ngozi's face appeared in the gap. "Can't sleep either." The younger girl's voice was subdued, stripped of the anger from earlier. Amara shook her head. Ngozi entered, closing the door quietly behind her. She wore pajamas that probably cost more than a month's food in Oludare, her braids pulled back from her face, making her look younger, more vulnerable. "I wanted to say something." Ngozi started, then stopped. Started again. "Earlier, I said terrible things. Things I didn't really mean. Or maybe I did mean them in the moment, but I shouldn't have said them out loud." "You were honest." Amara's voice was neutral. "That's better than pretending." "Is it though?" Ngozi moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes I think honesty is just an excuse for cruelty. Like I can say whatever horrible thing I want as long as I claim I'm just being real." The insight surprised Amara. This girl who had seemed so shallow, so self-centered, clearly thought more deeply than she let on. "My mother used to say," Amara spoke carefully, "that words are like arrows. Once released, you can't call them back, but you can choose not to shoot in the first place." Ngozi nodded slowly. "That's wise. Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman." She was. The simple statement carried oceans of grief. She deserved better than she got, better than dying in poverty, better than believing the man she loved had abandoned her. Dad really didn't know? Ngozi's question was genuine. "About you? About her situation?" He didn't know. Amara believed it now, fully. The pain in Chief Okonkwo's eyes when he spoke of Chinwe was too real to be fabricated. The letters never reached her. The money was stolen. He thought she'd moved on, married someone else. She thought he'd forgotten her. And between those two false beliefs, years passed that can never be recovered. "That's heartbreaking." Ngozi's voice was small, like something from a tragic novel. Except novels end. Life just keeps going. They sat in silence for a moment, two girls on opposite sides of fortune, finding unexpected common ground in the middle of the night. "I'm scared," Ngozi admitted suddenly, "that Dad will love you more, that he'll look at you and see Mom, your mom, and everything I am won't be enough." "And I'm scared," Amara responded, "that I'll never be enough, that I'm too damaged, too broken from what I survived, that one day he'll realize I'm not worth the trouble and send me back." Ngozi looked at her sharply. "He would never, wouldn't he?" Amara's voice was flat. "I'm not like you. I don't know how to be wealthy. I don't know which fork to use or how to talk to important people. I've never been to school properly. I can barely read. Every single thing here is foreign to me. How long before he gets tired of teaching me, correcting me, watching me fail at being the daughter he imagined?" The vulnerability in those words seemed to shift something in Ngozi. Her expression softened, the last remnants of resentment fading. "You can read, though. A little. Mama taught me before she got too sick, but I never got very far." Ngozi stood abruptly. "Wait here." She disappeared, returning minutes later with an armful of books. She dumped them on the bed, colorful covers, varying sizes, clearly chosen with thought. "These were my favorites when I was younger. Some are simple, some more complex. If you want, I could help you with reading and other stuff." School things. The offer hung between them, tentative but genuine. Amara stared at the books, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Why would you do that? Ngozi shrugged, uncomfortable with the direct question. Because you're right. This isn't your fault. You didn't ask to be born. You didn't ask for your mother to die. You didn't ask for any of the terrible things that happened to you. And maybe having a sister doesn't have to mean losing something. Maybe it could mean gaining something instead. Like what? I don't know yet. Ngozi's smile was small, but real. I guess we'll have to figure it out together. She headed for the door, then paused. Also, fair warning, Adana is going to try to make you over. New clothes, new hairstyle, probably etiquette lessons. She can't help herself. She's a fixer. Just don't let her turn you into a clone of her, okay? You should get to decide who you want to be. After Ngozi left, Amara picked up one of the books, a story about a girl who discovered she was a princess. The irony wasn't lost on her. She opened to the first page, struggling with some of the words but determined to try. Morning arrived with Mrs. Obi's gentle knock and another breakfast that seemed impossible in its abundance. The day passed in a blur, more introductions to household staff who treated her with careful respect, a phone call from Dr. Adeyemi confirming follow-up appointments, and finally mid-afternoon, Chief Okonkwo appeared at her door. Are you ready? His eyes held anticipation mixed with nervousness. For the surprise? They drove through Lagos, the city sprawling endlessly in all directions. Eventually, they reached a quieter neighborhood, pulling up before a building that looked like a warehouse from the outside, but hummed with some kind of energy Amara couldn't quite identify. Inside, the space was vast and filled with light from enormous windows. And everywhere were paintings. Large canvases depicting village scenes, small watercolors of flowers, portraits of people Amara didn't recognize. Landscapes that captured the heart of rural Nigeria with stunning accuracy. The walls were covered, the floor stacked with more leaning against every available surface. Your mother painted, Chief Okonkwo said quietly. Did you know that? Amara shook her head, moving as if in a dream toward the nearest canvas. It showed the Kalimba River at dawn, mist rising from the water, a girl kneeling at the bank washing clothes. The detail was extraordinary. Every ripple in the water, every strand of the girl's hair. She never told me. Amara's voice broke. I never saw her paint. Never saw any of this. She stopped when I left. The chief moved to stand beside her. Put away her brushes, sold her paints to buy food. When I finally tracked down people who knew her in Oludare, they mentioned she used to paint. That she'd been talented, so I started searching. He gestured at the room. It took me 15 years, but I found them. Paintings she'd sold over the years to make money. Pieces she'd given to friends. Work she'd abandoned. I bought every single one I could find. Hired investigators to track them down across Nigeria and beyond. This warehouse holds her entire artistic legacy. Amara moved from painting to painting, seeing her mother's hand in every brushstroke, her heart in every image. Village life captured with love and precision, the beauty in ordinary moments, women at the market, children playing, fields ready for harvest, storms rolling across the sky. She was brilliant, Amara whispered. Why didn't she keep painting? Poverty makes artists choose survival over art. The chief's voice was heavy with regret. She needed money for food, for medicine when you were sick, for basic survival. Painting takes time and materials she couldn't afford, so she sewed instead. Practical, profitable, joyless. He guided Amara to the back of the warehouse where a single painting stood on an easel, covered with a cloth. This one I found 3 months ago. The dealer said your mother painted it right before she died, that she traded it for medicine that didn't work. He pulled the cloth away. Amara's breath caught. The painting showed a young man and woman by the river, clearly in love, clearly together despite being apart. The woman held a baby, Amara herself, though painted before she was born, as if Chinwe had seen the future and captured it. And around the baby's neck hung the silver pendant, painted in such detail that it seemed to catch light that didn't exist. In the corner, in script that matched the pendant's engraving, one word: promise. She never stopped loving me. Chief Okonkwo's voice broke. Even at the end, even believing I'd abandon her, she painted us together, painted the family we should have been. Amara reached out, fingers hovering just above the painted pendant. What happens to all of this? To her work? And that's what I wanted to ask you. The chief turned to face her fully. These paintings are yours, your inheritance from your mother. You can keep them private, sell them, donate them, whatever you choose, but I have a suggestion if you'll hear it. Amara nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. An exhibition, a proper gallery showing of Chinwe Mwamba's work. Let the world see her talent. Let her be remembered not as a poor village woman who died in poverty, but as the artist she truly was. Let her legacy be beauty, not suffering. 3 days later, the DNA results arrived. Chief Okonkwo gathered the family in his study, the envelope sitting on his desk like a verdict waiting to be read. Amara knew what it would say. She'd seen the recognition in his eyes, felt the truth in her bones, but the formality of it mattered somehow. Ngozi sat beside her on the leather sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. A small gesture, but significant. Adana stood by the window, outwardly calm, but her fingers twisted together with nervous energy. Chidi lounged in an armchair, trying to project casual confidence, but his leg bouncing with anxiety. The chief opened the envelope with steady hands. He read in silence, his expression unchanging. Then he looked up directly at Amara and smiled. 99.9% probability of paternity. His voice was thick with emotion. Not that I doubted for a second, but now it's official. Legal, undeniable. You are my daughter. Ngozi squeezed Amara's hand. Adana let out a breath she'd been holding. Chidi grinned and gave a thumbs up. So what happens now? Amara asked. Now, the chief said, his expression hardening, we deal with Oludare, with everyone who knew and did nothing, with those who actively participated in keeping us apart. He pulled out a folder, thick with documents. My investigators have been thorough, very thorough, and what they've uncovered goes deeper than we imagined. He spread photographs across the desk, old letters, yellowed with age, postmarked from Lagos decades ago. Money orders, signed and stamped but never cashed. Bank records showing deposits made to an account that shouldn't have existed. Elder Benson wasn't working alone, the chief explained. He had help. Elder Kofi was his accomplice. Together, they intercepted every letter I sent for 5 years, 73 letters in total. They collected the money orders I sent, 38 of them, totaling over 200,000 naira in 1980s money. That would be worth millions today. What did they do with it? Adana asked. Cashed them, forged Chinwe's signature, and cashed every single one. Split the money between themselves and used it to expand their businesses, buy land, secure their positions as village elders. The chief's voice was ice. They built their wealth on money meant to save your mother's life, Amara. Money that would have paid for her medical care when she got sick. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Amara's mother had died because medicine was too expensive. And all the while, the money that could have saved her was lining the pockets of men who smiled at Chinwe in the village square, while secretly robbing her blind. That's murder, Ngozi said flatly. Maybe not directly, but they killed her as surely as if they'd poisoned her. The law might not see it that way, the chief admitted, but I do, and I will make sure they pay for every single naira they stole, every letter they burned, every day of suffering they caused. He pulled out more documents. Elder Benson is dead, but his estate is not. His children inherited his wealth. Wealth built partially on stolen money. They'll return it, with interest. Every naira. And Elder Kofi, Chidi asked, is about to discover that his world is built on sand. The chief's smile was not pleasant. I've bought the debts on his businesses. I own the mortgages on his properties. I've acquired leverage over every aspect of his life, and I'm going to use it. Amara shifted uncomfortably. The vengeance in her father's voice was understandable, but also frightening. This was a man who could destroy lives with a phone call, who wielded wealth like a weapon. What about the others? She asked quietly. The villagers who knew I was being abused and did nothing? The chief's expression softened slightly when he looked at her. What would you have me do? You're the one who suffered. You have a right to decide how justice is served. The question was enormous. Amara thought of Mama Sefa, who had spoken truth when others remained silent. She thought of the children who had mocked her, the adults who had looked away, the entire village that had watched a child suffer and deemed it acceptable. The school, she said finally. Build the school like you promised. Make it the best school in the region. Free education for girls, especially orphans and those from poor families. Hire the best teachers. Provide everything. Books, uniforms, meals, medical care. Make it so good that villages from miles around will send their daughters there. That's generous, Adana said carefully. After what they did to you. It's not generosity. It's strategy. Amara's voice was stronger now. The best revenge against people who wanted me to be nothing is to become something. And the best revenge against a village that values girls so little is to prove they're worth everything. Let Aludar watch their daughters thrive. Let them see what could have been if they'd chosen compassion over cruelty. The chief studied her with something like awe. You have your mother's heart. She would have said exactly that. Revenge through kindness, victory through grace. I'm not that graceful, Amara admitted. I want Elder Kofi to suffer. I want Blessing to lose everything. I want everyone who hurt me to feel a fraction of what I felt. But I also know that bitterness is a poison I'll end up drinking myself. So I choose this instead. We can do both, the chief said. Build the school and make them pay. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Over the next week, Chief Okonkwo moved with the precision of a general executing a battle plan. Legal documents flew, phone calls were made. Pressure was applied in ways Amara didn't fully understand, but could see the effects of. Elder Kofi's businesses began failing. Loans were called in. Suppliers mysteriously refused to deliver goods. Customers took their business elsewhere. Within days, the man who had sat on Oludar's council for 30 years was drowning in debt and desperation. He came to Lagos, hat literally in hand, begging for an audience with Chief Okonkwo. The chief made him wait 3 days before agreeing to see him. Amara watched from the doorway as Elder Kofi was led into the study. This man who had once seemed so powerful now diminished, sweating through his good shirt, his hands trembling. Chief Okonkwo, please. I didn't know. I never understood. You knew exactly what you were doing. The chief didn't offer him a seat, didn't offer water or courtesy or any of the hospitality that would normally be extended. You stole money from a pregnant woman. You burned letters from a desperate young man. You watched a child grow up in poverty and abuse while sitting on wealth you'd stolen from her. Don't insult me with claims of ignorance. I'll return the money, every naira. I'll sell everything. Yes, you will. The chief's agreement was flat, without satisfaction. You'll liquidate every asset. You'll return what you stole with 38 years of compound interest. And then you'll donate land for the school. Prime land in the center of Oludare, where everyone will see it and remember why it exists. I'll be ruined. I'll have nothing left. Good. You'll know what Chinwe knew, what Amara knew, what it's like to have nothing while watching others prosper from your suffering. Elder Kofi's gaze slid to Amara, still standing in the doorway. Please, I have children, grandchildren. They'll suffer for my mistakes. Amara stepped into the room fully, and Elder Kofi actually flinched. This child he'd dismissed, ignored, condemned to suffering. She terrified him now. I was 11 when my mother died, Amara said, her voice steady. 11 years old with no one and nothing. You were on the council that placed me with Blessing. You knew she was cruel. The whole village knew. But you chose the easiest solution, not the right one. So yes, you have children and grandchildren. And maybe now they'll understand that actions have consequences, that cruelty has costs, that you can't build prosperity on someone else's suffering and expect it to last. She paused. But unlike you, I won't punish children for their parents' sins. Your grandchildren can attend the Chinwe Mwamba School, free of charge. They'll receive the education and care you denied me. They'll learn what you never learned, that every child matters, that every life has a value, that compassion is stronger than cruelty. Elder Kofi's face crumpled. He wept openly, this proud man reduced to broken sobs. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But you can't. Chief Okonkwo's voice was final. None of us can. We can only move forward. You'll return the money within 30 days or face criminal charges for fraud and theft. You'll donate the land within 60 days, and you'll live with what you've done for the rest of your life. That's the deal. Take it or prepare for prison. Elder Kofi took it. He signed documents with shaking hands, his tears staining the papers. When he left, he looked 20 years older than when he'd arrived. Do you think he's truly sorry? Ngozi asked after he'd gone. She'd been listening from the hallway with Adana and Chidi. I think he's sorry he got caught, Amara said. Sorry he has to face consequences. Whether he's actually sorry for the pain he caused, I don't know. Maybe that doesn't matter. The results are the same either way. You were merciful, Adana observed, offering to let his grandchildren attend the school. That took strength. Or weakness. Amara wasn't sure herself. Maybe I should have demanded more, made him suffer more. Mercy isn't weakness, Chief Okonkwo said firmly. It's the hardest strength there is. Anyone can be cruel, choosing kindness when you have every right to be vicious. That takes real power. News traveled fast. Within days, all of Oludar knew what had happened. The stolen money, the burned letters, the conspiracy that had shaped decades of suffering. The village that had once ignored Amara's existence now couldn't stop talking about her. Blessing tried to flee. She packed in the middle of the night, attempting to disappear before consequences could catch up. But Chief Okonkwo's reach was long. She was stopped at a bus station, returned to Oludar, and forced to face what she'd done. The community fund she'd stolen, every naira was to be repaid. Her house, the one where Amara had slept in a storage shed, was seized and would be converted into a dormitory for the school. Her sons, spoiled and entitled, suddenly found themselves in the same poverty their cousin had endured. Is it wrong, Amara asked Adana one evening, that I feel satisfied watching them struggle? It's human, Adana replied. You're allowed to feel satisfaction when justice is served. You're allowed to be glad that people who hurt you are finally facing consequences. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you someone who survived. Justice was being served, but Amara's transformation was far from complete. The girl from Oludare was becoming someone new, but who would she choose to be? And what would happen when she finally returned to the village that had rejected her? Subscribe now because the next chapter brings everything full circle in ways you won't see coming. This story is approaching its powerful conclusion. 2 months passed like water through fingers. Amara learned to live in this new world, though it still felt like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. The house became familiar. The faces became family. The fear of waking up back in Oludare slowly faded. Tutors came daily. Patient women who taught her reading, mathematics, history, science. At first, the words on pages swam before her eyes, meaningless squiggles that refused to make sense. But gradually, with Ngozi sitting beside her most evenings, the letters formed words. The words formed sentences. The sentences opened worlds. She devoured books the way starving people devour food. Stories of other girls who survived impossible things, tales of heroines who fought and won, histories of women who changed the world despite everyone saying they couldn't. Each book was a gift, a promise that she too could become something more than what suffering had tried to make her. Adana took her shopping, just as Ngozi had predicted. They filled an entire walk-in closet with clothes Amara had never imagined wearing, dresses in colors bright as dreams, shoes that didn't pinch or fall apart, undergarments that actually fit. At first, Amara felt guilty putting them on, like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. But Adana's gentle insistence wore down her resistance. "You're not pretending," Adana said one afternoon as they sorted through yet another delivery. "This is who you are now, Chief Okonkwo's daughter. My sister. You're allowed to dress like it." But the transformation wasn't just clothes and books. Dr. Adeyemi came twice a week, talking with Amara about things that had happened in Oludare. The beatings, the hunger, the constant fear. At first, Amara didn't see the point. Talking couldn't change the past. Words couldn't undo scars. Noratra Dr. Adeyemi agreed during one session. But talking helps you carry it differently. Right now, those memories are like stones in a bag you drag everywhere. We can't remove the stones, but we can teach you to carry the bag in a way that doesn't break your back. Slowly, painfully, Amara learned to speak about things she'd buried deep, and slowly the nightmares that woke her screaming began to fade. Not gone, never fully gone, but quieter, more distant. Chidi appointed himself her guide to normal teenage life. He dragged her to football matches where she learned to cheer for his team, took her to the cinema where movies played on screens bigger than houses, introduced her to music she'd never heard, artists whose songs spoke to hearts across oceans and years. "You're too serious," he complained after one particularly quiet afternoon. "You're 15. You're supposed to be annoying and loud and obsessed with boys or fashion or something equally ridiculous." "I don't know how to be those things," Amara admitted. "Then we'll learn together. I'm an expert at being ridiculous." And he was. His jokes were terrible, his dance moves worse, but his acceptance was complete. He never treated her like damaged goods or someone to be pitied. Just a sister who needed to learn how to be young. The exhibition opened on a Thursday evening. The gallery was in Victoria Island, all white walls and expensive lighting that made Chinwee's paintings glow like jewels. People came in evening clothes, wine glasses in hand, speaking in cultured voices about composition and technique and artistic vision. Amara wore a dress Adana had chosen, deep blue like river water, simple but elegant. Her hair had been styled, her face touched with light makeup. She looked in the mirror before leaving and barely recognized herself. This polished young woman couldn't possibly be the girl who'd scrubbed clothes on riverstones just months ago. But the pendant around her neck was the same. That connection to her mother remained constant, no matter how much else changed. The chief stood with her as people circulated, studying the paintings, murmuring appreciation. Critics made notes. Wealthy collectors asked about prices. And gradually, the truth of Chinwee's talent became undeniable. This wasn't charity exhibition. This was real art, powerful and moving, worthy of attention and respect. A woman approached, elderly but sharp-eyed, leaning on a carved walking stick. "You're the daughter." It wasn't a question, Amara nodded. "Your mother had extraordinary vision. Look at this one." She gestured at a painting of market women, their faces lined with years, but eyes bright with life. She saw dignity where others saw poverty, beauty where others saw struggle. That's rare, that's precious. "Thank you," Amara managed. "The proceeds go to a school, I'm told. For girls who have nothing. For girls who deserve everything," Amara corrected gently. The woman smiled. "Even better, I'll take 3 pieces, and I'll be making a donation to the school as well, in your mother's name." Throughout the evening, similar conversations repeated. People saw the quality, heard the story, carefully edited, focusing on Chinwee's talent rather than tragedy, and responded with their wallets. By the time the gallery closed, over 30 paintings had sold. The money would fund the school for years. But more than money, something else happened that night. Chinwe Mwamba stopped being invisible. Articles appeared in newspapers. Art critics wrote reviews. People who'd never heard of a small village called Oludare suddenly knew the name of a woman who'd painted beauty despite suffering. Mama's legacy wasn't poverty anymore. It was art. It was vision. It was proof that talent doesn't die just because circumstances are cruel. 3 weeks later, the school opened. Chief Okonkwo had moved with terrifying efficiency. The land elder Kofi donated sat in Olodar's center, impossible to ignore. In just 2 months, buildings had risen. Classrooms with proper desks and blackboards, a library stocked with hundreds of books, dormitories for girls who lived too far to walk daily, a cafeteria that would serve actual meals rather than scraps. The Chinwe Mwamba School for Girls stood like a monument, beautiful and permanent, a reminder of what happens when people choose compassion over cruelty. Amara returned to Oludar for the opening ceremony, her first time back since leaving in Chief Okonkwo's vehicle months ago. The village looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. Or maybe she was just bigger now, stronger. The entire village gathered. They had to. This was the biggest thing to happen to Oludar in generations. People who'd ignored Amara's suffering now strained to see her, to glimpse the girl who'd become something impossible. She stood on a platform beside her father, looking out at familiar faces. Zara was there with her family, her expression complicated. The women who'd watched Amara wash clothes without offering help. The men who'd sat on councils and made terrible decisions. Mama Sifa, tiny and ancient, grinning with fierce satisfaction and blessing. Standing at the back, her sons beside her, all three of them looking hollow-eyed and worn. The house Amara had suffered in was gone, converted as promised. They lived in a small rental now, struggling like Chinwe had struggled, like Amara had struggled. Amara felt satisfaction at that, but also something else, something that might have been pity. Chief Okonkwo spoke first. His voice carried across the crowd, strong and clear. He talked about education as a right, not a privilege, about girls deserving opportunity equal to boys, about communities that thrive when everyone is lifted up rather than some being pushed down. Then he introduced Amara. My daughter will say a few words. The girl many of you knew. The woman some of you failed. Listen to her. Learn from her. Remember what your indifference cost and what compassion could have saved. Amara stepped forward. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not good with speeches. I'm still learning to read properly, so I didn't write anything down. I'll just speak from my heart. She looked out at the faces, some curious, some guilty, some defiant. This school exists because my mother died believing she was forgotten, because letters that should have reached her were burned, because money that should have fed her was stolen, because a village watched a child suffer and called it justice. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Good, they should be uncomfortable. But this school also exists because my father never stopped looking, because he loved my mother enough to keep searching for 38 years, because he believes girls matter, because he knows that what happened to me should never happen to anyone else. Her voice grew stronger. Every girl who walks through these doors will get what I was denied: education, safety, 3 meals every day, medical care when sick, teachers who believe in them, a future that isn't limited by poverty or gender or circumstances they didn't choose. She paused. Some of you will send your daughters here. Some of you will benefit from the generosity you didn't show me. That's fine. I'm not my aunt. I'm not the elders who stole and lied. I'm my mother's daughter, and she believed in second chances even when she never got one herself. But understand this. Her voice hardened. Every time you see this school, remember what it cost. Remember the woman who died too young. Remember the child you failed. Remember that your cruelty didn't win. That suffering doesn't have the final word. That love, even love that arrives late, is still stronger than all your indifference combined. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then Mama Sifa started clapping. Her ancient hands made sharp sounds in the quiet. Others joined slowly. Not everyone. Not Blessing or Elder Kofi or those who'd profited from cruelty. But enough. Enough to matter. The ribbon was cut. The doors opened. Girls streamed inside, their eyes wide with wonder at spaces designed for their success. Classrooms filled with light. books waiting to be read, a future opening like a flower. Amara watched them, these girls who would have what she never had, and felt something settle in her chest. Not closure, not forgiveness, but something like peace. The school's first term passed in a blur of activity. 73 girls enrolled, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Some came from Oludare, others from villages miles away. Each one arrived carrying stories of struggle. Fathers who didn't value education for daughters, mothers who worked themselves to exhaustion, circumstances that threatened to swallow potential before it could bloom. Amara visited often, watching these girls discover what learning could mean. Their transformation mirrored her own in ways that made her chest tight. Girls who arrived silent and withdrawn began raising hands in class, asking questions, laughing during breaks. Girls who'd never touched a book devoured stories the way Amara had. Girls who'd been told they were worthless began to believe otherwise. The teachers were excellent, handpicked by Chief Okonkwo, and paid well enough that the best educators in the region competed for positions. The meals were nutritious and plentiful. The dormitories were clean and safe. Everything Amara had lacked, these girls received freely. But money and buildings weren't enough. Amara understood that in ways her father couldn't. These girls needed more than education. They needed to know that surviving didn't make them broken, that suffering didn't define them, that they could become anything despite where they started. So she began spending time at the school, not as a visitor, but as something between a teacher and a guide. She told her story, the edited version at first, just enough to let them know she understood. But gradually, as trust built, she shared more. The storage shed, the beatings, the hunger that never quite left even now when food was abundant. The girls listened with eyes that recognized her truth because it echoed their own, and they began sharing their stories too. Whispered confessions of uncles who touched in ways that made skin crawl. Aunts who preferred their own children and made sure everyone knew it. Villages that saw girls as burdens rather than blessings. Dr. Adiemi came monthly, offering counseling for any girl who needed it. Some took her up on it immediately. Others waited, watching, learning to trust. But gradually, the school became more than just classrooms and textbooks. It became a place where wounds could heal alongside minds. 6 months after the school opened, Amara received a letter. Not email or a phone call, but an actual letter on paper, delivered by hand. The handwriting was shaky, the spelling imperfect, but the message was clear. It came from Blessing. Amara, I know I have no right to write to you, no right to ask anything of you after what I did. But I am writing anyway because I need you to know something. I am sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Not sorry I lost everything. Sorry for the pain I caused you. Sorry for every blow, every hungry night, every moment I made you feel worthless. You were a child who needed love, and I gave you cruelty instead. That was evil. I was evil. I understand if you never forgive me, I don't forgive myself. But I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did, what I took from you. And I am sorry. Amara read the letter 3 times, trying to understand what she felt. Anger, yes. Satisfaction that Blessing was suffering. But also something unexpected. Recognition that apology, real apology, took courage even when it came far too late. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she carried the letter for days, reading it in quiet moments, testing her feelings against it like touching a wound to see if it still hurt. It did hurt, but differently now. Less sharp, more distant. Finally, she wrote back. Not forgiveness, because that felt too big, too generous for what Blessing had done. But acknowledgement, recognition that the apology had been heard, even if acceptance remained complicated. Blessing, I received your letter. I don't know if I can forgive you. Maybe someday, maybe never. But I can say this. I hope you learn from what happened. I hope you become better than you were. And I hope you teach your sons to value people regardless of their circumstances. That would honor my suffering more than any apology ever could. She signed it simply. No warm closing, no invitation to further contact, just her name and the knowledge that some debts could never be fully repaid. The letter sent, Amara felt something shift. Not closure, that word was too neat for the messy reality of trauma, but perhaps completion. A chapter ending even as new ones began. Life in Lagos continued. Amara finished her studies with the tutors, passing examinations that qualified her for formal schooling. She would start at a proper academy in the fall, joining students her own age, navigating the social complexities of teenage life she'd never experienced. Nosy had become a true sister, protective and fierce, teaching Amara the unspoken rules of their world with patience and humor. Adana remained steady and wise, a calm presence when everything felt overwhelming. Chidi made her laugh when grief threatened to pull her under. And Chief Okonkwo, her father, though the words still felt strange on her tongue, he tried so hard to make up for lost years that sometimes Amara had to remind him she was real, not a dream that might disappear. One evening, as sunset painted Lagos in golden orange, Amara stood in the garden with him, both of them quiet, comfortable in silence. "Do you think Mama can see this?" Amara asked suddenly. "The school, the paintings, everything?" Chief Okonkwo considered the question seriously. "I don't know. I'm not sure what I believe about such things, but I think if love survives anywhere, if connection transcends death, then yes, she sees, and she's proud. I wish she was here, to see you again, to know you never forgot her. I wish that more than anything." His voice broke slightly. "But I have you, a piece of her that lives and breathes and grows stronger every day. That's a gift I never thought I'd receive, a grace I don't deserve but will spend my life being grateful for." They stood together as darkness fell, this father and daughter reunited by chance and choice, bound by blood and pain, and the slow, difficult work of building family from fragments. The exhibition's success led to others. Chinwe's paintings traveled to galleries across Nigeria, then beyond. Her name appeared in art journals, discussed by critics who recognized genuine talent regardless of the artist's origins. Museums acquired pieces for permanent collections. A documentary filmmaker began work on a film about her life and legacy. Chinwe Mwamba, the poor village woman who died invisible and forgotten, became known, celebrated, remembered not for her suffering, but for her vision. And the school grew. A second building was constructed to handle increased enrollment. Girls who graduated went on to secondary schools and universities, carrying with them the knowledge that their worth wasn't defined by circumstances or gender or what others believed possible. 3 years after Amara first washed clothes by the river and caught a billionaire's attention, she stood in that same spot. The river flowed unchanged, indifferent to human drama, but everything else had transformed. The village had changed. New businesses flourished, built on honest work rather than stolen money. Young girls walked to school with books under their arms rather than water buckets on their heads. Opportunities existed that hadn't before, and Amara had changed most of all. The frightened, beaten child was gone, replaced by a young woman who knew her worth, who understood that survival was its own kind of victory, who carried scars but refused to let them define her future. She touched the pendant at her neck, the promise her mother had kept even when hope seemed impossible. "I made it, Mama," she whispered to the river, to the sky, to whatever part of Chinwe Mwamba still existed in memory and love. "I survived. I'm safe. I'm loved. And I'm making sure no other daughter has to suffer the way we did. Your promise didn't die. It just took a different shape." The water flowed past, carrying her words away, carrying stories of pain towards something that might be healing. Behind her, a car waited. Inside, her father and siblings were ready to return to Lagos, to home, to the life they'd built together from broken pieces and unexpected grace. Amara took one last look at the river, at the spot where everything had changed, and turned toward her future. A future bright with possibility. A future her mother had dreamed of but never saw. A future earned through suffering but defined by hope. She walked away from the river without looking back. Some chapters close, some wounds heal, and some promises, even those made in desperation and kept in absence, still have the power to transform everything. Amara's story proves that suffering doesn't have to be the end of the story, that love can survive decades of separation, that justice, though delayed, still matters, that every girl deserves to be seen, valued, and given the chance to become everything she's capable of being. If this story moved you, subscribe to see more tales of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their circumstances don't define their worth, because every person has value, every story matters, and sometimes the most broken beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings.